I told you I really like this All Israel news site. Pretty darn good. It's written from a Christian perspective. I mean, the guy, Bloomberg guy, he's a Jew, but he's a believer. Anyway, I'll just read the title of each article. Biden's schizophrenic Middle East policy is disastrous. He vetoes anti-Israel UN resolutions, but lets Iran attack U.S. forces 76 times without decisive military response. Then this one, watch this video of Hamas terrorists stealing humanitarian aid and beating Gaza citizens. Next article, Hamas rule is disintegrating, says IDF chief, as leaked footage shows surrender of apparent Hamas terrorists. Time is running out. Getting aid to Gaza Christians thwarted by looting, snipers, intense street battles between Hamas and IDF. Next article. Hezbollah could be next in line after Hamas, says Israel National Security Advisor. Day 65. Fighting intensifies in Gaza Strip after U.S. vetoes UN ceasefire resolution. And this one was, this fellow, I don't know who his name is Rakid. He's Arab. He says, after leaving Islam and following Jesus Christ, I came to realize and reject the anti-Israel lies I'd been taught in my youth. Next article, shame on the Red Cross for becoming political. Of course, you probably heard the president of the University of Pennsylvania resigned because of her anti-Semitism. Gaza war will continue with high intensity for the next 2 months, according to Israel assessment. And show you that the Jews are not how you reportedly considers allowing Palestinian workers back into Israel despite security concerns. Anyway, okay. The history of all of this is obviously drawn out. We got with regard to the promise to Abraham, with regard to the land, and the sojourn in Egypt served a purpose beyond. God works it all together for good. The Jews are abused, not at first. They were not abused at first. They were in Goshen because of Joseph and the power he wielded, and he got them a place to land, 70 people. They would have never got that without him being in the position he wound up in, having this authority that he had. And he saw to it that his family and their descendants had the choicest real estate in Egypt. It's called Goshen. It's in the northeast quadrant up there. It's the prime land in Egypt in that day and time anyway. But eventually, the Pharaoh, the dynasty, switched from a pro-Jewish ruler, a smart guy, in that regard, to an anti-Semite. God was blessing them in the land, down in Egypt in this way. They had good jobs, and they were procreating like crazy. They said that, and so they started this propaganda thing that Israel would rise up when their enemies tried, because Egypt always had, and these nations had to be concerned about invaders from other countries coming in. And so they said, well, they'll join up with their enemies. And we can't let that. So it was pure hardcore lies and propaganda to turn the Egyptians against the Jews, and they enslaved them and took away whatever rights they had, and made them literally slaves. Excuse me. So the page 2 there, 6A, 430 years elapsed from the call of Abraham to the establishment of the Mosaic covenant. Galatians 3:17, what I'm saying is this: the law which came 400 years later does not invalidate a covenant previously ratified by God so as to nullify the promise. The Abrahamic covenant takes precedent over the Mosaic covenant in this regard. The Mosaic covenant could allow for the Jews to be evicted, but always the covenant is there and the land is theirs. We covered that in the previous doctrine. We covered the particulars. It's a sign. All the people that were messing around in the real estate there when the Jews were out from 70 AD onward, they never built that land up and made it a prosperous piece of real estate. There's no reason why it couldn't be. It's very productive to this day. But God didn't let it, because he said that the land is going to be a witness and lay fallow and be not a pleasant place. Not a, you wouldn't look at it and say, oh, that's a promised land. It was like it was under judgment too. So when Israel came back, they started cleaning the place up. Pre-1948. They started cleaning it up, draining the swamps, and it's quite productive agriculturally. And they seem to just keep rolling on no matter what's going on. They're fighting enemies on the 2 or 3 sides of them. And they just keep, and they keep doing their lives, keep doing what they got to do. It's a small country. It isn't anywhere near the size of Texas. It's a small country. And they're doing what they got to do. They're in there for keeps now. Oh, they're going to have to go through a lot of stuff. They haven't seen anything yet. Well, they have, but I mean, compared to what they're going to have to walk through in the tribulation. When basically the whole world's going to gang up on them. And we'll see. I will curse those that curse you. Well, that's what happened to Egypt of Moses' day. The Jews walked out after 10 plagues. They were flat on their face. Wiped out their formidable army at the Red Sea. And guess who came into the country? The Amalekites, also known in your history books as Hyksos. And they ruled over them that same period of time that they oppressed the Jews, before the native Egyptians finally kicked them out. Foreigners ruled over them. That was their humiliation for enslaving God's people. What do you think's going to happen to all these people around them now that are raised up against Israel, verbally and militarily? They're in for it, big time. And that's why that's one of the reasons for the tribulation. So, to point B, to avoid confusion, Exodus 12:40 should be translated, and the sojourning of the sons of Israel who lived in Egypt was 430 years. The startup date is 1876, when Abraham began his life as a sojourner, not when they went down to Egypt. The first Jew was a sojourner. Now, he wasn't oppressed in the land, but he was a sojourner in the land. Acts 17:5, which reads, but God spoke to this effect, that his descendants would be aliens in a foreign land. Note his descendants. And note aliens start with Isaac, born in 1846. In a foreign land. They lived in a foreign land, even though they were in the land of promise. Does that make sense? It's a foreign land. It was owned and run by the different Canaanite groups. It was a foreign land. It did not become officially theirs until the Joshua conquest. And they would be enslaved and mistreated for 400 years. Enslaved and mistreated, began with the Egyptian bondage occurring after the death of Joseph. Of the 430 years, the Hebrew race sojourned in Canaan 220 years and in Egypt 210. E, an examination of the lineage of Levi, ancestry of Moses, makes it impossible for the Jews to have been in Egypt 430 years total. Exodus 6 through 19. Told you the story, I told it numerous times. I'll tell it again. I like it. I was in the University of Missouri, St. Louis branch, history class. The teacher started bad-mouthing Moses and said he was the illegitimate child of so-and-so. Dr. Burns. And I remember him. This was just basic freshman, all the impressionistic freshmen sitting out there. And my buddy, Terry Crisson, he stood up. Sir. And he started reading from Exodus. Moses' parentage. He said, these are very ancient documents. They go way back. What is the source of your information? The guy had to practically shut the class down. He had no documentation to spout this out. Liberal education, huh? The Bible can't be taught and spoken of in public schools. That'd be too bad, wouldn't it? They can't have a moment of silence and prayer over the intercom system. Everything but the Bible. I got a thing online in the capital there in Iowa, state of Iowa. They had a satanic display put up in there. Satanic. Wow. Another picture showed him having a deal where a woman's up on a stage and she's got a Bible and she's just ripping it to pieces and throwing the pages out. And Satan is down there. This country's had it. It's had it. We don't even make it. And all in the name of freedom of speech, except my speech. You know, that is suppressed in places. Seven, Israel's captivities do not invalidate the land grant of the Abrahamic covenant. Here's another one from Joel, the book of Joel. Another one of God's prophets. For behold, in those days and at that time, when I, God, restore the fortunes of the captivity of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, as otherwise known as the Armageddon plain. They had 7 years to figure this out. They would have had 7 years to figure this out and get on the right side of things. But all these nations are going to be gathered together and brought into this slaughter field. The last big attack and threat against Israel will be the nations of the earth, commonly known as the Armageddon campaign. And in that one, the omnipotence of our Savior, Jesus Christ, the Lamb, he's called in the book of Revelation, the wrath of the Lamb, he will single-handedly slaughter millions. They haven't seen anything yet. But those individuals that came there, they didn't have to come. They believe the big satanic lie that we can finally do it this way. Then I will enter into judgment with them there on behalf of my people and my inheritance, Israel, whom they, the Gentiles, have scattered among the nations, and they have also, that was the verse I was wanting to look for, they've also divided up, and notice I underlined it, my land. And I can do with it as I please. And it is my land. Now, all the earth and all it has, all physical creation is God's. It's his because he brought it into existence. Just as much as some possession is yours because you paid for it and so forth. It's mine. But this is my special land. for my special inheritance, Israel. All right, in this regard, there are statements made in the Bible about innumerable descendants. Innumerable. It means you can't number them, right? Well, we got computers. We can number a lot of stuff. So it makes me wonder about some things. If Jews are brought over onto the new earth, who are in their natural bodies, but get cleansed, like the Gentile believers, that are taken from earth 1 and put on earth 2, and they are in natural bodies like Adam and Eve before the fall, without a sin nature and without a death gene, and all the other problems that are associated with life on earth. The original hint of descendants or progeny is found in Genesis 12:2, and I will make you a great nation. 2, Abraham was promised descendants as dust, Genesis 13:16. Beach sand, Genesis 22:7. And stars, Genesis 15:5, 22:17. And also Romans 9:4 and 5. Adding to this his legacy, God promised that he would, from him, arise a multitude of nations. Not just the nation Israel. That's the big deal. But it arise from him a multitude of nations. And that, of course, is in Genesis 17:4 and 6. The Genesis 17 situation is when Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to him and said, I am God Almighty. You got to introduce yourself. I got all the power. Walk before me and be blameless. Now, he's talking to a guy that's been around the block a few times. But you know what he's basically saying? The same thing I'd say to any of you. And all your history behind you of positive volition. Keep walking and stay blameless with regard to the plan. The maturity adjustment. Stick with what you've been doing. I will establish my covenant between you, me and you, and I'll multiply you exceedingly. Abraham fell on his face and God talked with him saying, Abraham fallen on his face. Abraham's under a lot of pressure. Yeah, I know there's pressure, but some of it's self-induced. But okay, I don't know if I'd be any better either. It's like, is God rubbing his face in this? I'm going to make you many descendants, and you don't even have one kid to show for it. You don't have one, and you're 99. God deals with the hopeless situation. Whatever your situations are that seem hopeless, they're not. There's a formula. You need something, want something, even want something. It isn't just about, I need that. That's fine. A necessity. You need something. Maybe you won't feel like you can afford it, or it's out of your reach for whatever reason. Or you want something. You put it before God. And you keep putting it before him until you get it. You don't stop. It's called knock on that door. It's like that parable, you know. Someone comes to visit a friend late at night when he and his family are all in bed. And he comes at an inopportune time. And this person's saying, hey, open up, I need this guy. Somebody's coming in town and I need to borrow, blah, blah, blah. We're all in bed. And no. He just keeps beating on the door and finally, okay. Now, when I treat God like that, I mean that in some instances, things come quick. Because it's the nature of the thing. You offer up a quick prayer and boom, it's there. Something little, something you might think is insignificant. Help me with this. Bless my efforts right here and now. Can't hurt. You got to do it in fellowship. This is the problem with a lot of us. We don't have things because we don't ask. Or we're doubting Thomases. Oh, that doesn't glorify God. He wants people of faith that puts their trust in him like you put your trust in someone that you could completely trust and completely had all the resources in the world to shower on you if necessary, which he does. Abraham fell on his face saying, and God talked with him saying, as for me, behold, my covenant is with you. We're still on track here, aren't we, Abraham? 99 and childless. And we're talking descendants and all this business. And you'll be a father of a multitude of nations. Not just the Jewish nation. You know, he had Ishmael. He fathered Ishmael through Hagar. I can't resist. Hagar, rent-a-car. It's a car rental place in Jerusalem. I saw it. God just showed it to me. I'm driving down the interstate, right? I look over and see, you know, like Hertz rent-a-car. I look over there and said, the Jews got a sense of humor. Good grief. They called that Hagar rent-a-car. So that's where we get Ishmael. Thanks to Sarah. And Ishmael was the father of a number. He was like a Jacob type. He was the father of a number of princes who formed their own. They're spread all over out there. There's a multitude of nations in the Middle East. All these people come bow down at Mecca. Billions. By the way, you're going to get a name change. I like the way God does this, don't you? He doesn't give the blessing up front. Oh, here's you and Sarah are going to have a son right off the bat. No, this was to develop them and to hone them spiritually. At this point in the narrative, they're both on edge. They tried to Operation Ishmael. That blew up. God put thumbs down on it. After Sarah passed, he had another wife, Keturah. That's her name, Keturah. Driving down the road going towards the Dead Sea area, down there towards Masada. Literally, there was an arrow, a sign that had an arrow pointed on it. Pointed out into the tules out there, the desert. It said Keturah. I said, Brenda, should we drive down here if we maybe see Keturah? That was that. I remember that as clear as a bell. But see, if I didn't know any of these things in the Bible, it would mean nothing to me. Some dummy tourist means nothing. You'll no longer be called Abram, but your name will be Abraham. For I've made you the father of a multitude of nations. It's in the divine decrees. And I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings will come forth from you. I will establish my covenant between me and your descendants after you throughout their generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your descendants after you. Of course, there are three types of Jews. It's easy to remember. We'll start with R. Racial. Genetic. Religious. That's an R. Regenerate. Born again. And if you're not a born again Jew, you're going to go to hell just as fast as any of the rest of them. You got to follow in the steps of your father Abraham, who believed, and he got credited with plus R at some point in his life. Now, some Jews are just racial. They're not religious. They're not regenerate. Some are racial and religious. And then there's some that are racial and regenerate and therefore religious to an extent that they're a believer. And I will give to you and to your descendants after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I'll be their God. God further said to Abraham, now as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you throughout your generations. Now we're going to have a sign for this covenant. It's called circumcision. Now, this almost seems like to add insult to injury. Here's a man who is sexually dead, and he's going to ask him to take a knife and remove his foreskin. It's a minor surgery. Okay. I'm telling him to do that. God isn't being cruel. He knows what he's doing. And there's a reason for it. The foreskin represents the sin nature and the isolation of the STA, which occurs for the first time in the salvation adjustment. For the very first time in the life of someone who believes in Christ, when they initially believe, for the very first time, their STA is locked down. And the Holy Spirit's in charge. So the sign of the Abrahamic covenant was circumcision of the flesh, which parallels circumcision by the Spirit. We have a separate doctrine. It's one of the signs, and it's the sign of the Abrahamic covenant. It's incorporated into the Mosaic covenant because every male that is born in Israel is to be circumcised at 8 days old. And anyone who refuses, and if anyone wants to come and be a part of Israel but isn't a Jew, they have to, before they can ever celebrate Passover or anything else, they have to submit to circumcision. So here's Abraham without a son, without a sexually dead, blah, 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 and now you're going to be now you got to do this surgery. God isn't being cruel, being mean. He isn't like that. So that was accomplished. Everybody in your organization gets circumcised, even the non-Jewish ones, all of them. Guess what generation didn't circumcise their boys? The Exodus. The Exodus generation was so stubborn, it wasn't unbelievable. And Jews have been doing this for hundreds of years. And now they're not going to do it? That's the Exodus generation. Just throw that in. So all the males that grew up uncircumcised among the Jews, when they walked over into Canaan, when they crossed the deal, there was a place, Gilgal. And all these men had to be circumcised. That's when the enemy should have attacked. But they're not going to, because God controls history. The enemy was back on their heels already, afraid as they get, because they knew the whole history of Israel, the Red Sea crossing, and they crossed the Jordan at flood season, and God blocked it up there. Those Canaanites could see that. I don't know if there's only one smart one in the whole bunch. She's a celebrity, not these dummies we have today. Rahab the prostitute. She was the only one in there that had enough sense to add it all up and say, you know, I think I'm switching sides in the angelic conflict. Anybody that's not circumcised will be cut off. Then God said to Abram, as Sarai, your wife, I forgot about her. This is verse 15. You shall not call her Sarai. Next time you talk to her, you call her Sarah, which means princess. I'm going to give her an upgrade. And this has to do with their spiritual development. I'll bless her. And indeed, I will give you a son by her. Now he drops this on. I'm going to give you a son by her. By her. Then I'll bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people will come from her. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed. I don't think he guffawed out loud. I think he's chuckling down like that. He's got some manners. And said in his heart, will a child be born to a man 100 years old? And will Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child? And Abraham said to God, oh, that Ishmael might live before you. Let's promote Ishmael. We got him already. God does things first class. And Ishmael isn't first class. It's your right woman, Sarah. That's first class. We go first class. But God said, I wonder how the tone of his voice, no. But Sarah, can you understand plain Hebrew? But Sarah, your wife, will bear a son. And since everything's so funny, you'll call him Isaac. And that's the Hebrew word for laughter. God has a sense of humor. Little laughter is going to come into the world. And I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. As for Ishmael, I've heard you. Behold, I'll bless him, and I will make him fruitful and multiply him exceedingly. He shall be the father of 12 princes. I said 6, I was wrong. Just like Jacob, 12. And I will make him a great nation. Well, the Arab world qualifies for that. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you at this time next year. So if that's a whole 12-month cycle, that means they had to wait 3 months. And they felt this physiology thing go through their bodies. When a woman's all dried up and sexually dead, and it would especially hit her physically. Because it involves all this ability to be all the things you have to be a childbearing woman. Like time is set back. And I suspect physiologically this miracle hit them all at one time. And 3 months later, she's pregnant. Boom! Because before that, there wasn't anything wrong with her physically. God closed her womb. Because this was going to be their ultimate phase 2 test, which why they have to get 3 more months in here? So they can get to the point where they have a relaxed mental attitude. I'm relaxed. God's going to do this. So they could enjoy it before it hit them and have capacity for it. All right, we'll break and do the Lord's table.